Yo, what is going on, Headliner Nation? Welcome into week 6. It's crazy to say that. We're almost a third of the way through the NFL season already, and it feels like it just started. But whether you're dealing with some injuries to key running backs, or maybe you just got a few bye weeks that you're trying to work through right now, my week 6 start and sit analysis for the running back position is absolutely pivotal for you. But before I jump into all of that analysis, we have a huge giveaway that we're doing right now. And unfortunately, Jonathan Taylor is banged up, so maybe he won't make his way into our lineups. But this full-size autographed frame jersey could make its way into your house just by signing up over on Underdog. For the month of October, anybody that heads on over to Underdog and signs up for a new account using our code word Headliners, depositing at least $10 and participating in your first contest is going to be entered to win this autographed Jonathan Taylor framed jersey. Not only could you end up winning this, but you're going to get a super special pick'em that is almost guaranteed to hit, and you're going to end up getting a deposit bonus of up to $1,000. And I've got several pick'ems in this episode that you're definitely going to want to try and follow this week. And of course, we talk about pick'ems on Sunday mornings and over in our Discord as well. So if you want to follow the action and start building your bankroll, then get signed up over on Underdog, get a chance to win this jersey, and play along with us all season long. And Thursday Night Football this week has a couple of running backs that are absolutely going to be in our lineups this week. But what type of fantasy production can we expect? Jordan Mason should end up being a super solid fantasy option this week. The Seattle defense allowed 129 rushing yards to Tyrone Tracy last week. In week 4, they allowed 118 combined rushing yards to Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery. And now they're allowing the 8th most rushing yards on the season. They went from looking like a defense that nobody could do anything against to a defense that does have some holes that are going to be able to be exploited. And maybe that was because they had some generosity at the beginning of the season when it came to their schedule. But now, from a fantasy perspective, they don't look nearly as daunting. Jordan Mason has ran for at least 77 rushing yards in all 5 of his games this season, and he's run for over 100 yards in 3 of his 5 games this season. You can lock him in as one of the safer bets in fantasy this week. After the week that Kenneth Walker had against the New York Giants, maybe listing him as a low risk is going to be a mistake, but it's my gut feeling that they're going to get back to Kenneth Walker this week. It was even brought up by Coach Mike Macdonald that they need to establish the run, and they didn't do that against the Giants. They gave Walker a few carries and then completely abandoned it and just started throwing the ball around. I don't think that happens this week. So does he get more than 5 rushing attempts? Absolutely. And this is a running back that carved up the Detroit Lions rush defense, which is still one of the best in football just a couple of weeks ago on Monday Night Football. Kenneth Walker has touchdown potential every single week. And if Mike Macdonald holds true to his word by getting Kenneth Walker going early, then he should end up being just fine for fantasy purposes. Heading into the 2023 season, Travis Etienne was a must-have for me, and he ended up executing on that. But heading into 2024, I was not nearly as high on him. I didn't love his ADP, and Doug Peterson had already made comments at the end of last season and this offseason that they were going to actively look to reduce Travis Etienne's role in hopes of keeping him healthy. Well, they did reduce his role, and unfortunately, he still isn't healthy. And now he's trying to work through an injury, and Tank Bigsby is taking advantage of that. And I was hypercritical of Tank Bigsby last season. He sucked, and I definitely made it known that he was not touching Travis Etienne's job. But in 2024, things are completely different. Because of Travis Etienne's reduced role and the fact that he's already banged up, Tank Bigsby has become the safest option in this backfield. And that is why for a majority of the last few weeks, I have been telling Travis Etienne owners, get Tank Bigsby on your roster. Hopefully you ended up doing that, because if you did, you should be starting him over Travis Etienne this week. Now, this is still going to be a split backfield, and Travis Etienne will probably see a majority of the passing work out of this. But Tank Bigsby is going to get more than enough volume at this point to be a safe start, especially considering how efficient he has been. And because the Chicago Bears are allowing the third most rushing touchdowns on the season, Tank Bigsby has a great opportunity to find the end zone once again. Now, for Travis Etienne owners, you may want to hold off on starting him this week, but you may not have a choice. And that's where you have to make a decision. If you're starting Travis Etienne, his floor may be like 4 or 5 fantasy points, and his ceiling, especially since he's lost touches to Tank Bigsby, may not go far into the double digits. So really, Travis Etienne is going to be a flex option for you. But maybe we need to think about sitting him until we know that he's fully healthy and we can see a 50-50 share in this backfield. Jacksonville's defense is allowing the 9th fewest rushing yards to opposing running backs right now, but they're allowing the 2nd most receiving yards and have allowed 6 total touchdowns in the first 5 weeks of the season to running backs. So DeAndre Swift may not see a huge day on the ground in terms of his volume and rushing yards, but he should still make an impact this week. And considering the fact that he was basically disposable 2 weeks ago, now he's really become a must start because of the role that we've seen. Efficiency still is not going to be great for him, but if they're giving him 15 plus touches a week, he probably still needs to be in our lineup. If this game ends up getting out of control, Roschon Johnson could steal a couple of goal line carries later in the game, and if that happens, Swift also could see a reduced ceiling. James Conner and Josh Jacobs in the Arizona and Green Bay matchup should be a really fun running back battle to watch this week. And James Conner has been fantasy viable every single game this season except for one against Detroit. He's definitely had a super solid floor, and he's shown a little bit of upside to go with it. We know that as long as James Conner is healthy, he's going to see a decent amount of volume, and he's definitely fantasy viable. But for Josh Jacobs, he has a little bit of a higher ceiling this week, going up against the Arizona Cardinals, who allow the 2nd most rush yards and the 6th most fantasy points to the running back position. Now, Jacobs is a smash start for me this week, and people last week were like, what about Emmanuel Wilson? Why are you not including him in the start and sit episode? Last week was exactly why. He only played 15 snaps. When Green Bay is in a neutral game script, you're not going to see Emmanuel Wilson all that much. Green Bay's really only utilizing Emmanuel Wilson in a game script that allows them to efficiently rest Josh Jacobs. So either they have a big lead or they're down big. Anything in between of that, Emmanuel Wilson is not going to play an awful lot. So with Josh Jacobs currently being listed at 69.5 rushing yards over on Underdog, I'm jumping over that and smashing higher. This game script definitely should be more neutral than blowout in either direction. And because of that, Josh Jacobs will have a solid amount of carries and a matchup with a lot of potential. A lot of eyes are going to be on the Indianapolis-Tennessee matchup this week, trying to figure out whether or not Jonathan Taylor will be able to make his return. And head coach Shane Steichen made the comment to begin the week that JT is feeling better, but really didn't offer anything else outside of that. Feeling better is great, but that still doesn't mean he's anywhere close to playing. With the Tennessee Titans defense being very solid against the run this season, Trey Sermon is definitely going to be a guy that I'm not going near this week. There's not enough upside in this matchup for me to want to throw Sermon into my lineup. Now, if Jonathan Taylor can go for some reason, it's going to still bring a lot of risk. If he's not 100%, he could be splitting snaps with Trey Sermon. He could end up being more of a decoy than anything. Right now, we'll keep an eye out on this and we'll listen to what's being said about JT. If for some reason he plays, we'll reevaluate at that time. Indianapolis, on the other hand, has been pretty easy to run against, now allowing the 4th most rushing yards in the NFL. And Tony Pollard should have a super safe floor this week. So if you're looking to start him and you're looking for like 8 to 12 fantasy points, you definitely are going to be able to buy into that area. Scoring a touchdown will give him even more upside. The only concern would be if Tennessee ends up leading this game by quite a bit, do we see a little bit more Tyjae Spears? I'm not really interested in flexing him, but he definitely could hurt Pollard upside. Another AFC South running back we need to keep an eye on this week is going to be Joe Mixon. Now, to begin the week, there hasn't been a lot of word on whether or not he'll be ready to play. So we need to monitor this throughout the rest of the week. But I do feel like if he's even close to 100%, he's going to be out there, especially given the fact they're likely missing Nico Collins for the next couple of weeks. They're going to need a solid run game to help work through that. Now, if for some reason Joe Mixon plays, they're not rolling him out there with any type of concerns. If they feel like he is still banged up, he's not going to play. If he does play, it means that he's good to go. And he's going to be a low-risk candidate for me in this matchup. Even if he sees 15 carries, they should be quality carries with probably a goal line touch or two to throw in this week. Now, if Joe Mixon misses, I am not going with Cam Akers and Dare Alawala Bing Bang. Don't get offended by that nickname. It's just what we've called him for several years. Both of those guys are going to be eating into each other's touches and really no telling who's going to have the most upside. Akers ended up scoring a touchdown, but Dare had a majority of the touches. Hopefully you listened to us last week about Rhamondre Stevenson and you weren't buying into a bunch of the misinformation over on X or Twitter or whatever you want to call it, or posted anywhere else on social media. Because people continue to say, Rhamondre Stevenson's been benched. Why would we play him? He was never benched. All they said was that Antonio Gibson was going to start. Ladies and gentlemen, that means absolutely nothing in the NFL today. All that means is that you took the first snap of the game at the running back position. We said it all week long. More than likely, Antonio Gibson was going to start. He was going to see a drive, and then Rhamondre Stevenson was going to be the guy the rest of the game. That's exactly what happened, and Rhamondre Stevenson smashed. Now, at the end of the game, he got twisted up a little bit, had to come off the field. I haven't seen anything at this point that leads me to be concerned he's not going to play, but Rhamondre Stevenson does have a tough matchup this week, so I wouldn't expect a whole lot of floor. But I definitely wouldn't plan on sitting him anytime soon. They signed him to a big deal this offseason, starter money at the running back position. I don't care if he didn't start last game. He was still the guy, and he will be moving forward. With all the injuries and all the buys right now, you're probably in a position where you have to start Rachaad White if you own him. If you have Bucky Irving, you may be a little bit more fortunate where if you wanted to see how this backfield shakes out, you could end up waiting. If you have both of them, that's where things get complicated. Now, technically, Rachaad White had the better day on the ground on Thursday Night Football in Week 5. But the big problem there is that he ran for 72 yards on 10 carries, but 56 of those yards came on one play. He only averaged 1.7 yards per carry the other 9 carries. Now, Bucky Irving had a similar issue. He ran for 44 yards on 9 carries. 16 of those yards came on one play. So for his other 8 carries, he only averaged 3.5 yards per carry. But once again, he was more efficient than what Rachaad White was. Rachaad White has dropped from playing over 80% of the offensive snaps last season to barely getting to 58% last week. Bucky Irving and Rachaad White are splitting early down work right now and goal line work. The reason Rachaad White is seeing more snaps right now, though, is because he's being consistently utilized on 3rd and medium and 3rd and long situations as the pass catching back. So once again, if you've got to start Rachaad White, I absolutely get it. I'm not expecting a high ceiling, and he's definitely losing a lot of touches to Bucky Irving. The guy with the most upside is Bucky Irving. He's been the most efficient this season, and he definitely has the best opportunity to score. Personally, though, if you can get away without starting either of them right now, I would want to go that route. Now, if you decided to hang me off a bridge by my foot and tell me you're letting go if I don't pick one for you, I would probably still go with Bucky Irving right now. Alvin Kamara did not have a great Week 5, and Week 6 is not going to get easier going up against this Tampa Bay run defense. This week, Alvin Kamara is going to need to find the end zone if he wants any shot at top 12 potential. He'll see a decent amount of work in the passing game, which will help his floor stay pretty safe for the most part. But in terms of rushing yards, if he doesn't break any big runs, he's going to have trouble reaching a high RB2 position there. And then, of course, needing a touchdown to get into the top 12. I really don't blame Jerome Ford for his lack of production so far this season. This offense is an absolute mess and doesn't have a really high ceiling with Deshaun Watson as their quarterback. So for Jerome Ford, you may be in a position where you have to flex somebody because you're dealing with injuries and buys. Well, if you want 3 to 6 fantasy points, Jerome Ford is definitely your guy for that. If you're looking for more upside though, Jerome Ford isn't your guy. Really, for me right now, Ford is only an emergency option when you need somebody to fill in and you just can't take a zero. Saquon Barkley is one of the safest bets at the running back position right now. He'll definitely see solid volume this week. And even though Cleveland's defense doesn't allow a ton of yards on the ground to running backs, they are tied for the 3rd most rushing touchdowns allowed to running backs. Saquon Barkley could find his way to the end zone this week. Maybe not once, maybe twice. Brian Robinson was able to find the end zone twice last week, which salvaged what would have been a horrible fantasy day. And unfortunately, going up against Baltimore, I could see a lot of the same thing happening this week, where scoring 1, maybe even 2 touchdowns is absolutely going to be needed for him to be fantasy viable. Now, some people are probably going to ask about Austin Ekeler as well. Well, Austin Ekeler had 67 rushing yards last week, but 50 of them came on 1 carry. So he only had 17 rushing yards on his other 5 carries, which is not great. For me, Austin Ekeler is not a flex option this week, and if you're rolling with Brian Robinson, you're hoping that Jaden Daniels can push the ball down the field, which absolutely can be done against Baltimore, and that Brian Robinson gets those red zone touches. Washington is currently allowing the 6th most rushing yards to opposing running backs, and now they get to face the NFL's leading rusher. And let's just take a minute to bask in the glory in what may be one of the most critical picks that were made this fantasy season, and that was Derrick Henry, who routinely had an ADP in the 3rd round. And if you don't agree with his ADP, I don't know what to tell you. ESPN, CBS, Sleeper, all of the main websites out there had his ADP in the 3rd round. If you don't like it, go talk to them. I can't fix that for you. For week 6, let's go ahead and lock Derrick Henry in for not only a touchdown, but a super solid day overall and potentially a top 5 finish. The Chargers and Broncos matchup may not bring a lot of upside for the running backs in that game. It will be good to have J.K. Dobbins back this week, and I think he has a solid floor. It doesn't feel like this is the type of game where the Chargers are going to want to go out and throw the ball 35 or more times. They're going to want to run the football. And for the Chargers, running the football may be a little bit easier instead of trying to throw it against Patrick Surtain and that Denver defense. Now, is Dobbins' ceiling scary? Absolutely it is. It's going to be a tough path to try and get there. Hopefully he can break a couple of big gains, and if he can do that, he should still be really solid. But don't be shocked if he goes for 15 carries and maybe around 60 yards, and you really don't get a whole lot other than that. Now, Javonte Williams and his usage last week is really encouraging for those of us that held on to him and really need to utilize him the rest of the season. I think he's headed in the right direction. But going up against the Chargers, who allow the 3rd fewest fantasy points per game to running backs so far this season, I really don't think this is the matchup that we want to try and shoot for. If you have other options with more upside, I would go that route. If you don't have any options, you put them in there, you cross your fingers, and maybe say a little prayer. Pittsburgh and Las Vegas is just another matchup that I'm not super excited for the running backs this week. Najee Harris just has no ceiling right now. His efficiency has been horrible this season. And even last week, going up against the Dallas defense that has been up and down in terms of stopping the run, he couldn't get anything going. This is a solid matchup for him. So floor-wise, he should still be pretty reliant to be in your fantasy lineup. But he's not going to go out there and he's not going to win you the week. And for Las Vegas, we haven't seen any consistency at the running back position. Zamir White missed last week, and I don't know if he's going to be ready to go this week, but he's basically sucked all season long, which is what we told you would happen this offseason. So if you're still waiting to play Zamir White, definitely wouldn't be playing him this week, even if he's available to go. And Alexander Mattison, who's stepped up as the RB1, really isn't giving you any numbers close to that either. In any type of a matchup, Zamir White and Alexander Mattison are not great fantasy options. But in a matchup like this, they certainly shouldn't even be considered. The Lions-Cowboys matchup this week is going to be an absolute banger. Detroit has a chip on their shoulder. They want to go into that building and absolutely blow the Cowboys out. They want to avenge that close loss last season, and they want to make sure nothing like that happens again. Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery are both going to be low-risk starts for me this week. Absolutely love both of them, but their ceiling is going to depend on a couple of different things. Number one being the health of the Dallas defense. Right now, they've got some key contributors banged up. How healthy will they be going into this matchup? And number two, which Dallas run defense shows up? Because they've either been really good against the run or they've been awful against the run. There really hasn't been any in between. David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs will get plenty of volume, so the floors are really solid for both of these guys. But their ceilings could end up being massive as well. And that's why over on Underdog, with David Montgomery having a current rushing line of 59.5 yards, I'm absolutely loving it. I'm going to go higher than that this week. I think Detroit runs the ball and they run it well against this Dallas front, especially if Dallas is banged up. And later in the week, when we find out more about the Cowboys defense and if they're going to be missing any guys, this number could actually end up going up. So if you're going to play a ticket with it, I would do it early in the week. I could end up being very wrong about Rico Dowdle this week, and I feel like a lot of people are going to let me know in the comments that they already think that I'm wrong about Rico Dowdle. But give me a minute to explain. Now, your argument is going to be Rico Dowdle is coming off of a career game last week against Pittsburgh, a solid defense. I get that, I understand that, and Rico Dowdle definitely is the RB1 in Dallas as of right now. You're probably also going to argue that Kenneth Walker ran well against the Detroit Lions. He picked up quite a few yards on the ground and he ended up scoring 3 touchdowns. But here is the major difference here. Number one, Detroit is coming out of a bye. So they've had some extra time to prepare and they can get themselves established to take on the run game, hopefully a little bit better than they did against Seattle. But number two, Seattle's offensive scheme and playmakers is far different from what Dallas currently offers. Maybe Dak Prescott is over Geno Smith, and I wouldn't argue that. But give me DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, Jackson Smith-Njigba, Noah Fant, and Kenneth Walker over what Dallas currently sports right now with CeeDee Lamb, whoever you want the number 2 wide receiver to be, whether it's Brandon Cooks when he's healthy, whether it's Jalen Tolbert or anything else, Jake Ferguson, and Rico Dowdle. Seattle can spread you out and make you super thin in the box. Dallas really doesn't do that as well. And because of that, Detroit can play that run a little bit better this week and definitely could have Rico Dowdle in a position to not see nearly the upside that he did last week. If you're starting him, I absolutely get it. And I'm probably not going to tell you to sit him because his touchdown potential still is going to be there because Dallas should be able to pass the ball well. He could get a red zone carry, he could get a goal line carry, and still give himself a pretty decent floor. I know a lot of fantasy owners are frustrated with Bijan Robinson right now, but this is the week where things can get back on track. And if you have Bijan Robinson, he needs to be in your lineup. And this is not a cop-out, but Bijan Robinson is going to be my Manscaped must-start running back of the week. Now, the reason I'm highlighting him as my Manscaped must-start is because I'm seeing a lot of questions about getting rid of him and trading him. Don't do that this week. Keep him for the Carolina game. Watch him blow up, fingers crossed, and then if you really want to get rid of him, then trade him afterwards when his value's a little higher. Now, if you're really wanting to give somebody from your league a gift this season, don't give them Bijan Robinson at a reduced price. Head on over to Manscaped and pick something out of their great lineup of tools and get it for 20% off plus free shipping by utilizing code word Headliners20. Besides, I'm willing to bet that there's probably some guys in your league that need Manscaped way more than their roster needs Bijan Robinson. And given the state of fantasy football right now, that says a whole lot about your league mates. Bijan Robinson should end up having a super safe floor this week. It's the ceiling that I am a little bit worried about, because if this game gets out of hand and Atlanta blows Carolina out, we could definitely see Bijan Robinson give some touches away to Tyler Algier towards the end of the game. But right now, Bijan's rushing line is 71.5 yards over on Underdog. I'm willing to go over that right now, and it's probably going to increase as the week goes on. But for Bijan Robinson, if he can go over 71.5 rushing yards, he's probably going to score a touchdown as well, and that's going to make his fantasy day. If you're thinking about flexing Tyler Algier, I also don't hate it. Now, that's going to bring some risk, because if they don't end up blowing out Carolina, it's going to limit the amount of touches that he does get. But if he can be really efficient with 10 touches this week, he could still end up being a fantasy viable player at your flex spot. Right now, the Atlanta Falcons are allowing the 4th fewest fantasy points to the running back position, and they've only allowed 1 rushing touchdown all season long. Chuba Hubbard has been fantastic over the last 3 weeks, but here in week 6, he's not going to have nearly that same type of upside. I wouldn't say that we're sitting him or benching him, but I would say that if you have some guys with more upside, I would probably play them in your RB2 spot. And then I would consider Chuba Hubbard as a flex if you don't have anybody with a safe floor. The Cincinnati offense has been on fire lately, but unfortunately, they haven't been able to string together too many wins with that offense. Going up against the New York Giants, though, on Sunday Night Football, they may be able to get back on track. But the running back position this week for Cincinnati is going to have a whole lot of questions. Now, the Giants defense has been pretty solid against the run this season. The numbers might look a little bit better than they actually are, because Seattle basically abandoned the run last week and just forgot how to do that. But it doesn't mean that the Giants still have been pretty good at stopping the run. But the biggest question mark is going to be Zach Moss, because as of this recording, there hasn't been an update on his injury as of yet. So as the week goes on, if we don't know up until game time of Sunday Night Football whether or not Zach Moss is going to play, that could lead to some question marks about trying to play him and what that could mean for Chase Brown. Now, as of right now, Zach Moss, high risk for me, because even in this matchup, Zach Moss definitely could end up being a tough start going up against the Giants, especially if he's limited in any capacity. Chase Brown is a little bit of a safer start for me over Zach Moss. Now, if Zach Moss is ruled out early in the week, and we know for sure he's not going to play, Chase Brown probably stays at a medium risk for me, but he does have a little bit more floor and a little bit more upside. And at that point, I would consider him as a flex option or a low-end RB2. For the Giants running backs, though, this could end up being a really solid matchup for them, but we don't know who it's going to be as of yet, and that's another thing that we need to keep an eye on. If Devin Singletary goes, I like him in this matchup to have a pretty solid floor. If he doesn't go, then that means Tyrone Tracy becomes a guy that almost needs to be put into our lineup as a flex player, because he's going to have a solid ceiling going up against Cincinnati's run defense, but he's also going to have a solid floor. Really, the hope is right now that Devin Singletary misses this week. If that were to happen, and we know that early in the week, it brings a lot of clarity to whether or not we should be starting Tyrone Tracy. If it ends up being a game time decision, that's really going to hurt what we could potentially do with our lineup. The Bills and Jets will be matching up on Monday Night Football this week, and we'll get to the Robert Saleh firing and what that could mean for Breece Hall in just a second. But let's discuss James Cook first and his wide range of outcomes this week, because this Jets defense is very good against the pass and the run right now. James Cook has had some problems with efficiency this season, and he's been very reliant on the big play. If the big play doesn't come this week, then there are 2 things that have to happen for him to unlock his upside. Number 1, he has to score. That would not shock me. As long as Buffalo can move the football and get down inside the red zone, James Cook may be the best bet to go ahead and score. But getting into the red zone is definitely going to be a concern for the Bills going up against the Jets. The Bills' offense did not look great last week. James Cook is going to have to be a key contributor in the passing game for them to get into the red zone and for Cook to be able to score. Cook needs at least 5 to 6 receptions this week and really needs to see 5 to 6 targets. If he doesn't see that type of work in the passing game, it could be a long day for the Bills, it could be a long day for fantasy owners, and it could be a long day for James Cook as well. All right, on to the New York Jets. And for Braylon Allen and Breece Hall owners, going up against the Buffalo Bills, who allow the second most fantasy points per game to the running back position, is a great start this week. But does the firing of Robert Saleh change anything? Now, the New York Jets did officially announce that Jeff Ulbrich, their defensive coordinator, would be taking over as the interim head coach. So the play calling responsibilities are not going to change. Those are going to stick with Nathaniel Hackett, who I believe is part of the problem for the Jets offense right now. I know Nathaniel Hackett and Aaron Rodgers were boys back in Green Bay, but Hackett really hasn't shown me anything as a play caller since then. During his time with the Denver Broncos and even with the New York Jets, I have not loved their offense. So do I expect any significant changes down the road for the New York Jets? Probably not. The only way that happens if they end up firing Nathaniel Hackett or if they give the play calling duties to somebody else. Which at this point in time, if the head coach is already gone, it definitely could be on the chopping block for other coaches as well. But at least we know Breece Hall and Braylon Allen could both be strong starts in this matchup this week. Breece Hall absolutely is going to be in your lineup. If you own Braylon Allen, I also would consider him over a lot of other options as well, as a guy that definitely has some solid RB2 potential. But Headliner Nation, that's going to do it for my start and sit analysis at the running back position here in week 6. Don't forget to get signed up over on Underdog so you can be entered to win that autographed framed Jonathan Taylor jersey. And if you're new here, hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, and turn on the bell notifications so you can check out all of our start and sit content, rankings, and live shows for the rest of the week. But for now, Headliner Nation, I'm going to get out of here. Stay safe, stay healthy, and I'll catch you all on the next episode of the Fantasy Headliners.